Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Kitchen time, a few different things going on here. There's a Restrepia, and the reason that one's getting done is it's just been in its media quite a long time, and it's one that normally stays quite wet, so obviously the media goes quicker. This is the last of my cooler, shadier ones to need repotting at the moment, so we get that one done. That's that list completely finished. I know it's in bloom. I don't know how close I can get, but these blooms are absolutely gorgeous and quite large for Restrepias. That's one of the Eric Young Foundation ones. Luckily, I would suggest that, having had an experience recently of that particular place that I wasn't happy with, the chances of getting the dreaded F in something like this are incredibly slim, because there's no real rhizome as such, although I suppose it's possible. Anyway, this is dry because it hasn't been watered, so that's got to come out of the pot. We've got a Paphiopedilum. That's just been in its pot a long time. Looks like it's got some active roots, and looking down the bottom, some dead ones, so that should repot okay. Not long finished blooming, so it's highly likely to push out a new growth soon, and that would be the time that some new roots would grow, so now's a good time to change the media. And then there's two Miltoniopsis. Oh, hang on, somebody at the door, I'll be back. Now it's Postman Pat, and this is the rest of the pots that I ordered. Somebody gave me a clue about these on eBay. Opaque, so big algae reducer. I'm not obviously bothering with an unboxing video for a few pots, but yeah, those are good. They're pretty sturdy. I wouldn't say they're really strong, but they're plenty good enough for an orchid pot. Really good raised base and opaque, so the light shouldn't get through enough to actually cause algae. They're quite large pots, but that was the smallest size they had, so they can be reserved for larger plants. Yeah, so got quite a few of those. That's half of them, the other half are still in the box. So that was that. Postman Pat disturbing me. Right, where was I? Two Miltoniopsis. Now, this one is Junette, and that's the one that was bought as a yellow one, and by the time I got it, it had faded to white. But it has bloomed since, and it does come out a pale yellow, and then it it does fade to a more creamy colour. This has got one maturing growth, not fully mature yet, the bulb's not formed, but it does have some new roots. Algae in the pot, and been in the pot a while, so that's the reason that one's coming out. I'm not letting these sit in their pots any longer than necessary from now on. It just causes root loss. And then this is the actual yellow hybrid that was a gift from Hannah. And I know we had a yay moment when we actually said we have a spike. But spike or no spike, I have some new roots growing from this latest growth, and it's been in the pot long enough to form algae and for the media to start breaking down. So plant first, bloom second. And as I've said in the past many times, I've never lost a spike through repotting. The only thing I've ever lost through repotting is some unopened buds on Phalaenopsis. That's it. Everything else I've repotted in spike, in full bloom. I've never lost a thing. So yeah, so I don't bother. When it needs repotting, it gets repotted. Now with these two, I'm lucky, because although they look like similar plants, they're not, because the it's actually tied in. The actual yellow hybrid with no name from Hannah has actually got a spike on it, whereas this one hasn't, so I know the difference. Right, so let's see what we got. Hopefully we should have a reasonable root system. Probably take that oldest bulb off now because it's quite low in the media. So this is the problem. This algae forms like a solid mass, and that's where most of the roots end up, on the edge of the pot. Quite a few. Oh boy, does that smell of mushrooms. See, even though this was repotted in January last year, so it hasn't even, it's been in the pot just over a year, and already this media is breaking down. Beginning to wonder whether this Orchids bark's as good as they say it is. But by adding moss to it, you know, you're reducing its life quite dramatically. Now what we've got here is quite a few old tired roots. In the centre, some dead ones. Yeah? So those have died since it was last repotted, I suspect. So there are some to trim off. And then round the outside here, the ones with the algae on are the latest roots. And this is what I'm getting at. I need to stop this algae. It's quite important to me. Yeah? And we do have some new roots growing. So they'll pick up the, providing I don't break them off repotting, they'll pick up from where the lost ones are taken off. But round the outside we've got some that are reasonable. I wouldn't say that's a brilliant root system. I've certainly potted up Miltoniopsis with a lot worse than that. So we'll give it a run under the tap, and boy does that media smell. It's really getting up my nose. We'll give it a run under the tap, trim off the old roots. This old bulb can, might even take both of those off, because they're going to stop me potting it at the right level. I think we might take those off. What have we got under the sheaths? Anything? You sometimes find some new roots even on older pseudo bulbs. Nope, nothing on that one. But I think these two can come off. As I said, they're only going to stop me potting this at the right level, so I'd rather they weren't there. And that saves worrying about cleaning up a lot of the old roots as well. Because they're on those bits. So what I've got left should be the reasonable roots of the plant. Yeah, and there's still a few of the old ones around the back here, but that's not bad. That will grow on. So that's one Miltoniopsis. Next Miltoniopsis. This again has got an old sunken bulb. They do have a habit of climbing a bit. This media is not quite so bad. It's got an earthy smell rather than a smell of squash mushrooms. Yeah, I mean this has got the old rhizome comes right down to here, this hot woody part, with this bulb at the top of it. But my little scissors aren't going to take that off, that's for sure. Let's get the big stuff. Dunk in the alcohol. Can't remember what these were last used for, but better safe than sorry. Fire starter. Go steady if you ever do this. If you've got too much alcohol on your blades, it'll drip. And when it drips and it's actually on fire, it'll burn. That's what burning stuff does. So take care if you set fire to your alcohol. Right, I'm just going to take that off there. Yay, no pink bits. Well, there shouldn't be, because this one, even if it had it when I first got the plant, has been repotted enough times probably to take the old part of the plant off, and like I've just done there, and has been treated as part of the regular treatment program, so it should be okay, and it is. These are good. You see what happens? These sheaves, in its natural environment, it would be in a very damp environment. I'm pretty sure that most Miltoniopsis come from montane forest. The air would be constantly damp. So the sheaths don't go dry and brittle. Yeah? Consequently, the roots can escape. But when they dry a little bit in slightly drier atmospheres, the roots go up the plant and come out the top of the sheath. At which point they usually die back because they can't get into the media. And the air's not wet enough as it would be in their natural environment. So that's not bad, and that's 3 nice bulbs roughly at the same level, so that'll pot up nicely. You've got some quite reasonable roots on that one. So that's the 2 Miltoniopsis. And now for something completely different. This is Paphiopedilum Magical Venus. Not long been in bloom, and I wanted to wait till the blooms were over. And this one's been in its pot a little bit too long, but not drastic, you know, not like 2 years or anything daft. And that's not bad, it's just got that earthy smell, and we should have mostly reasonable roots. There's a right manky one there and there and there, but they've been replaced. They've been replaced with some reasonable ones. So what have we got to come off then? Not too much. Not too much. Got a nice root here. That's really grabbed hold of the bark, so it can stay grabbed hold of. I'm not going to try damaging the root tip. Same here. That's grabbed hold of a couple of bits of perlite. But if I tried breaking them away from the root, you can damage these little roots because they're hairy. You know, they have a hairy surface, and that hairy surface. So the two roots that have died are the oldest two on the oldest part of the plant. Well, that's not bad. There was a time when I used to get these out of their pots, and I'd end up with no roots at all. Right, here we go again. Fire starter. Well, at least Ianson knows what I'm on about. A bit warm, but not too bad. Don't worry, my hands are clean. Right, so we've got the very oldest part of the plant there. That can just be snipped off. Tidy it up. Don't like leaving dead bits around the base of Paphiopedilums, because that's often where a new root can come out. And then if I take the base of the rhizome off, both the dead roots come off at the same time. So that's not a bad, for the size of that plant, 3 good roots. I'm happy with that, and no doubt, which is typical for me with my Paphiopedilums, this plant will now die, leaving this one, and a new one will come out. It would be nice to get 2, just for once, actually get 2 new roots. Now that doesn't need a rinse under the tap, and it's not going to get hydrogen peroxide on it either because of the type of roots I've got here. Yeah? Those surface hairs and things could be fragile, so I'll just make sure I've got as much of the old bits of media that will fall off without me struggling. Yep, that'll do. So that's ready to go. And the last one, what's in my pot, is Restrepia. There's me worrying about my tags fading. Well, this one's just as bad. That's the original one. It's Howlisei. I know that because I've just looked it up to find out which one needed repotting, so it's fresh on my mind. Now Restrepias have a very, very fine root system, like, you know, one of the finest of the orchids that I keep anyway. Very fine hair-like roots that in one's mind one might think are pretty damn fragile, but they're not. These are pretty sturdy roots. You can play about with these and they won't break. And if they do, they branch. It's not the end of the world. The important thing with this is just to make sure all the old media comes out. You know, this plant would divide, but I'd rather keep it as a large plant. Now would be a good time to divide it and get another one going, but I don't know that many people that actually grow Restrepias. I know some that have tried and given up. They kept saying they got horrible twisted leaves and they didn't grow very well. Well, they didn't grow very well because the humidity wasn't high enough, and they probably dried out too often, which doesn't do them any good at all. I'm not even going to bother trimming those roots. They're going to stay exactly as they are, because it's difficult to establish which are new ones and which are old ones. So that's just going to go in the pot as it is. With a Restrepia, I'll do one. When they grow, some of them, in fact a lot of them, produce many blooms. Yeah, many. And as they die back, you get these horrible tatty bits, which make the plant look really scruffy. And just by trimming them off, you end up with a really tidy looking plant. But what you've got to be very careful of is something like that, where you have got some old scruffy bits, but you've also got, in this case, a bloom, but sometimes you can have like a little spike just emerging. But I'm just taking advantage of having this under my nose with a pair of scissors in my hand, which doesn't happen often. So they do make the plant look incredibly scruffy, especially on some of the older ones where there's absolutely loads of them. I mean, that particular leaf there has bloomed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. 7 blooms that leaf has produced. They're quite productive. They're not all like that. Some of them only produce 1. But the ones I've got tend to produce many. Right, how are we doing here? Probably won't get them all, but I thought while it's under my nose, let's give it a little tidy up. Any dead leaves can come off. You know, little ones down at the base like this, they can come off. It's just to tidy up while I've got it here, really. These little tiny leaves down here, these are from when it was a really young plant. It's probably a seedling. Coming from Eric Young, it would have been a seedling once. Once upon a time it would have been a seedling, but they tend to grow them on. It's one of their own crosses. They produce quite a few Restrepia crosses. Most of them are pretty spectacular in their size. They do well. Right, where are we then? Not too many to go now. I'll probably not get them all, but it does pay to do them while they're under your nose. As I said, you just need to go careful that you're not actually taking a new shoot off at the same time, which is in amongst the dead ones. I've done it before, that's why I'm careful now. I always check quite carefully that what I've got hold of is dead stuff. But I have actually decked a few in the past, much to my annoyance. But this plant will look so much better when this is done. It will almost look like a new plant. Right, that looks like most of it now. We've still got a few. Just go careful there, there's actually a bloom on that one. There was a bloom on that one, see what I mean? And that's with quite precise scissors doing the cutting, as opposed to great big floppy ones. Oh, those are all dead. Those can come off. Those are all dead in there. They can come off. Oop, missed one. And that one, that's probably about it now. You see how much tidier it looks, and then the only thing left to do now is just look out for some of these low down leaves that are on, because they won't ever bloom or produce kikis. And then all I'm looking for is shoot dieback, where the leaves have already gone, just leaving like a dead shoot, like that. Yeah, no point in leaving things like that. It just tidies the plant up, gives it a nicer look. The leaf there, that's one of the older ones that can come off. Come on, fingers, thank you. What have we got here? Dead bit. That's probably about it. Sort of rejuvenated it and given it a bit of a new look. But you can see how much tidier it looks without all those spindly bits, yeah? And the dead bits removed from the bottom, except that one because I missed it. There we go. And also by getting rid of those dead bits, it gives the plant room to push up new growths without being hindered. You know, there's nothing in their way, as these leaves distort quite easily. And let's see if I can find a couple. One's like this, that's a relatively new leaf. That is lack of hydration combined with lack of humidity. And again, that's a bad one. Even though I've got high humidity, it's nowhere near the recommended level for these, which is 90%. Now if I had 90% in my grow room, there'd be a lot of other plants rotting away merrily, because that would be too high for most of them. But these grow really well in terrariums and things like that, where you really can keep that humidity incredibly high, and they'll do brilliantly. They love it. Almost to the point of dripping wet. They love it. Right, so that's got them all out their pots, tidy up time, and then the other reason I pulled those 4 out is they're all going in the same media, so I only need to mix up one lot. I'll be back. Okay, I've done a lot of the prep because it's only repetition at the end of the day. They're all going back in the pots they came out of, on the grounds that I haven't got anything smaller without going silly small, and I certainly don't want to go bigger, so I'm just reusing. The Miltoniopsis cleaned up quite nicely. They do have some reasonable roots. Some old media is going to have to stay there on the grounds I would damage good roots, so they're going to stay, and they'll probably need staking as well, now that they've become insecure or unsecured, whatever you want to call it. This is just a mix of small bark and sphagnum, and I'm always criticising the bark, aren't I? Well, perhaps for once I ought to stop and think and have a criticise of possibly the moss. I've noticed that this new batch of moss I've got just feels better. It's longer strands, it's a darker colour, it's obviously different to the stuff I've had in the past, and maybe that moss wasn't of the best quality, even though it comes out of the same bag and from the same place. You know, they must have good years and bad years, so maybe that last batch of moss just wasn't as good as it could have been, and it's the moss that's going over quicker. Could be, I mean, it's only a guess, but certainly this new batch of moss is different, and it's different enough to be really noticeably different. The colour is quite different, it's a lot darker, and as I said, the statement of the heat treatment has gone. So maybe if this isn't getting the heat treatment, it doesn't degrade it quite so much. And in theory we might then have zombie moss that comes back to life, which I'd be happy with. I'd be quite happy if it lived. Quite happy. Live moss is better than some inert thing. They both hold water, but a living organism would be more natural for the plants, wouldn't it? You know, you think about it. Now, do I need to tie that? No, that one will be okay. So that's one done. Next one. And this one again, some new roots coming, and I didn't take many roots off. I was getting to the point where I wasn't sure. Are you okay or are you not okay? Well, I'd rather leave them than risk taking off ones that are okay. So that's not a lot left, but again, I've got new ones coming off the latest growth. These seem strange, Miltoniopsis, unlike some other Oncidium types, is that they don't have really a set time when the new roots come. They seem to push new roots out almost continuously, and you'll even get new roots coming out from older bulbs, you know, which normally once the bulb has had its flush of roots, that's it. Whereas with these, they seem to carry on. Only in dribs and drabs, not like a mass flush. Mass flush on a Miltoniopsis, that'll be the day. Do you know, one day I really would like to actually lift a Miltoniopsis out of its pot, and it would just be a pot full of roots. One day I'd like to see that, but I've never seen it yet on any of mine or any of the ones I've bought, so it's never happened yet. Maybe this time round, as I've caught these a lot earlier than I would have done in the past and got them into fresh media a lot sooner, so in theory I won't have lost anywhere near as many roots this time as I possibly might have done in the past. Two main reasons for losing roots: too much water, staying wet too long. That's one in the same statement. You notice I don't use the expression overwatering. It's not overwatering, it's watering too often. so things are staying wet too long. Unsuitable media comes into the same category. Yeah. Even unsuitable media, if it's allowed to dry in between, or virtually dry, it's not as bad as it would be. Yeah, you're a bit wobbly, you're going to have a stake. Pity, but nonetheless, hopefully I can just stake the rear. The rest of the plant will, because it's joined on, it will just stick to it. Far less damaging. You know, putting a stake around the latest growth could damage the base of the leaves, or it could do where I tie them anyway. Because basically I always tie these types around the base of the leaf, top of the pseudobulb. And on the oldest one, you know, it's not a big deal. That's going to be the next set of leaves to drop off anyway. So that should hold it. So that's 2 done. That's the 2 Miltoniopsis. And I'll put their tags back in. And the one with the spike is that one. So that's that tag. Which means the other one is this one. Because that one's fading anyway. I'll have to have a new one soon. I'm going to go to some sort of art shop. Probably next time I'm down in the high street. There's an art shop there. And I'm going to buy a new fine point Sharpie from an art shop. The theory being it's far less likely to be a copy, cheap Chinese copy, which is what I think I've got now, which is why it's fading. A fine point permanent marker Sharpie should not fade. It should just stay there. It should take years. Ow! There's a thorn in there somewhere. Thank you. I'll live. I've got so used to squeezing this moss and actually feeling the thorn before it actually penetrates that I don't even bother looking for them anymore. I'm sure some of them end up in the pot as well. It's gorse, obviously from the area where they grow the moss. Right. It's relatively heavy on the moss for the Restrepia. So, you know, I'm not worried about clear pots anymore because I've got black pots to put them in. So the algae problem hopefully is no more. I shouldn't have to stake this because it's a floppy plant at the best of times. That's how they grow. And to grow away from the centre. But what I'm doing is holding the pot high, not the plot. I'm losing that probably. So that I can make sure I've got something under the base of the plant before I lower it, and then I'm lowering it onto media. It's very easy to get a huge air gap at the base of Restrepias. Their roots are so fine, it's very difficult to get the media really down in there, in amongst every single root. It's just a tangled mess. But as I've said, they might look fine, but they're far from fragile. Quite sturdy roots on these. You can actually get them in there quite firm, and they'll like you for it. But what I do try and do is make sure I've got media right down the outside of every part of the root system, so that I haven't got bare roots showing against the outside of the pot, because they've got nothing to get in. They're already on the outside of the pot. By making sure there's media all round them, they will grow to the outside of the pot eventually, but at least to get there they have to go through something. So they're then in the media, not straight up against the outside of the pot. I've got some sticking out the top here. I can just press those down with some media just to get them underground. That's got them. That's about it for that one. That needs a new tag because the old one is the original from when I bought it. So we'll get rid of that and do a nice new one for that one. Yep, that'll do nicely. And the last one is the Paphiopedilum. I don't want quite so much moss on this. Do you know, I used to think that these were terrestrials. Well, some are. But you have to bear in mind, in the Paphiopedilum world, there are those that grow on the forest floor in sort of leaf litter, so they're very nearly terrestrials, if not really terrestrials. Some of them grow on rocks. They grow on limestone sort of outcrops, on sort of rocky bits with a hell of a lot of water flowing around them. So they're not. I'm going to have to take some out because that root's got a big U shape in it. Now that's got to get in there. I certainly don't want the plant too high, and I don't want to press the plant down and break that root. So that should go in at about that height. That's not too bad. Obviously very easy to get media in amongst these roots without any air gaps. I don't press down hard with these. These roots look like the strongest roots in the world. I wouldn't push your luck with them. They will break as easy as hell. They don't break apart, they break the outside layer. But the damage, you know, doesn't get repaired. Now that is right over the edge of the pot for a very good reason. Yeah, it's going to grow here. Yeah, that's where the new growth's going to come out off of the current latest growth, and that will give it plenty of room to go. Who knows, we might get two. That'll be the day. Okay, I'm just checking. Now if I could see a root up against the edge of the pot with this, I wouldn't worry quite so much. You know, these are thick fleshy roots. The only thing I will do is make sure as I've got plenty of bark around the base of that plant. Not bark and moss, just bark. So I don't want to keep the base of the plant soggy, but that's where the roots are going to push out. And I've found that they're daft sometimes, Paphiopedilums, and they push their roots out quite high above the media. And then they often dry before they ever get near the media. So I always like to be up near the base of the plant. But I don't want to go any higher than that, otherwise next time I water it, it'll all come out over the top. And that is Magical Venus. So that's those four done. And as I say, that completes, I've got two more paths to do, but they're in bloom at the moment. And one of them's only just coming up to the year, so it's not desperate by any means. The other one could do with doing, but I'll wait till the blooms are finished on those. I'm pretty confident with these. None of mine are what I would call vigorous Paphiopedilums, and they don't start a new growth until after the bloom's finished on the previous one. None of mine have ever started a new growth early, so I will wait until the blooms are finished. And I'm confident with an awful lot of orchid types, they will not produce new growths while they're in bloom. I've noticed it with a lot. Not every single one, but as a general rule, the new growths seem to push out after the bloom spikes come off or have finished, start to die back, whichever type of orchid you're looking at. And obviously with the new growths, in a lot of cases the new roots will come. Not all. Some cattleyas will play games with you and they won't push their new roots out until the new growth is fully mature. So the whole growth grows right up, grows its leaf, then it starts its new roots. So it's, you know, no guarantees. All orchids have subtle differences. That's those four done anyway, and that's cleared off my cooler, shadier types. There's no more left to do this year now, so all those are done, so I can worry not about those. And they'll all have their black pots, so I can stop worrying about the algae in that area, because they're the ones that stay moist longer, so they're most likely to get the algae. They don't have the total dry out in between like some of the others do. Anyway, see you next time. Bye for now.